Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is another edition of Fresh Red Kills. So, Fresh Red Kills is where I talk about books that I have recently read. I just finished filming another edition from two books that I read, or I finished reading in June, and these are the next two books that I read. I'm going to start off with The Phantom of the Opera, and then I'll go on to The Tall Stranger. So, The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I cannot pronounce French for the life of me. But this, of course, was originally written in French. This is the English translation, although I am not entirely sure who translated this. It does not say, in this edition at least. I don't know if Leroux was the translator. I think this came out in English pretty much as soon as it came out in French originally. But this is a little bit of an older edition. This one came out, let's see, 1985, but I love that cover. I think it looks really nice. This is one that I found at a secondhand store in pretty nice condition. It does have a foreword by Peter Haining, but I pretty much ignored that. I kind of did a quick lookup of Peter Haining, and it seems like he kind of wrote works that purported to be history, like the real history of Sweeney Todd, and they are most likely not history. Nobody can find the sources that he claims to have, and I'm not sure what exactly he was going for there. So I didn't really pay much attention to the foreword. But diving into the story, and I read this as a group read with Mark over at Book Time with Elvis and some others. He kind of let me into the group with him, and this was a lot of fun. I didn't know what to expect with this. Of course, I had seen the musical. I had also seen quite a few times the 1925 Lon Chaney silent film version of this, and in some parts, that film is a very good adaptation of some of the things that happen in here, although the ending is quite different. I didn't realize that this was basically told as a history. Published around 1910, I believe. It's about events that happened in the 1880s in Paris, and the author is basically pretending to be something of a historian, gathering resources and articles and letters and I guess interviews to try and piece together what happened at the Paris Opera House in the 1880s and the so-called Phantom of the Opera that haunted it and terrorized it, it seems, creating some bizarre events. Now, the whole history thing doesn't always quite work or make sense, but we do sometimes switch perspectives, and all of a sudden we'll hear it first person from one of the characters because they wrote a memoir, and it's a fun conceit. I don't think it entirely gels, but I didn't mind it at all. And this, of course, the story is quite famous, but it's the Paris Opera House, the 1880s. There is supposedly a phantom who makes some odd demands. There are two men who recently buy the opera, and they are told that it is haunted by a phantom, and he has some things that he requires of them, and they don't take him seriously, and then things start to go bad. There is also a new singer, Christine Daae. It's been a long time since I've actually heard the name out loud. I think it's something like that. Who the Phantom takes a liking to, and of course, if you've seen the any version of this, the Phantom is not a ghost; that he is a man with a mask who is deformed, and he lives beneath the Paris Opera House in this kind of cavernous. There's almost an underground lake, and there's several stories. The Paris Opera House ends up being a very cool Gothic setting. It made me wonder how much precedent there was already with the old dark house motif, which I know in the 1920s became very popular in American silent films, with the trapdoors and hidden passages, and this is filled with that sort of thing. So it does make me curious about the literary origins of that sort of thing, because the Phantom has contraptions and mechanisms and ways to hide and trapdoors all over the place. And we have at one point, of course, Christine. She's basically taken by the Phantom. And one thing that I did not expect was the third act of this movie basically to be a dungeon crawl. We have two men who are trying to get down into the bottom of of the opera house, and they have all sorts of obstacles. I mean, it felt a little bit like a D&D dungeon, like going on campaign, searching for traps and seeing weird things down there and horrific sights. It was a lot of fun, way more fun and adventure-y than I kind of expected it to be. I expected this to be a super serious type of book, but it's not. Yes, there are some serious parts to it, but really, there are also some parts, a lot of humor in here as well. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Our heroes, I didn't really care much for. Christine and was it Raoul? They're pretty boring characters. But the Phantom, Eric, he ends up being very, very interesting. It's actually a very touching scene towards the end. I don't want to get into spoilers, but it's basically one of the first, acts of voluntary human contact that he's had from somebody, because of him being born deformed, and what that does to him emotionally. So this was actually a lot of fun, way more adventurous than I guess I expected it to be, and overall a very, very satisfying read. So yeah, I like this one quite a bit. Excuse me. The next thing that I had finished for June was Louis L'Amour's The Tall Stranger. I read this one for June on the Range. That is a booktube reading event. It seems to be an annual event now. This is the second year that it's happened. Created by Michael K. Vaughan, which celebrates Western literature. And I had picked this one up at Walmart a few months back when I happened to be in the store and saw it. They carry usually a few Louis L'Amour's. And this one sounded really intriguing. I guess I can just read the back here. Wagon trains heading west were forced to defend themselves against Indians, cope with injuries and illness, and struggle to find food. The group of Easterners Rock Bannon was scouting for faced another problem. They were being deceived. When Bannon warned them to remain on the Humboldt Trail, Sharon Crockett and the others refused to listen. Mort Harper, a stranger riding a beautiful black mare, had dazzled them with his charm and good looks. The southern route was the best way to go, Harper told them. But best for whom, Bannon wondered. That route led straight to the Salt Lake Desert. The conditions would be brutal, and if Harper wasn't steering them toward those deadly Alkali Flats, where were they headed, and what would happen when they got there? Now, that's an awesome premise for a book. Now, I can't say that, of course, that brings up to my mind that he's leading them maybe some almost like a deadly sort of trap, and they'll have to fight their way out, and Rock Band's going to have to defend them. It's not exactly what's happening. Of course, they are being tricked, but the mystery of all of this is pretty well solved within the first half of the book. And it's, the second half becomes people just kind of chasing each other and shooting each other. This was okay. It's very, very much in line with all the Western cliches that you would expect. This was published in 1957. And there was a movie about it, and I'm not sure which came first. I don't know if that was a movie that was an adaptation of the book, or if maybe there was a script, or I'm not sure exactly what the process was with all of this. And I have not seen the movie. Now, of course, this is a product of its time. So if you just want a fun, very basic, very quick read Western with men who are fiercely independent and punching each other and shooting at each other, and basically winning the affections of some pretty girl. That's pretty much what you're going to get out of this. There are some drawbacks, of course, to the 1950s. There is one character in here who he's one of the villains, and he is constantly referred to as a half-breed because he's half Native American. Now, of course, I would expect characters in the 19th century to refer to him as a half-breed, but Louis L'Amour refers to him as a half-breed, and he makes it pretty clear that one of the reasons this guy is a villain is because of his lineage, because he is a half-breed. His non-white features, or at least half non-white, are seen as something to kind of be repulsed by. So there's quite a bit of 50s racism in here that just has not aged well. Of course, you go and reading something from the 1950s, you can expect something like that. But buyer beware. It's pretty evident. It does take you out of it because it's pretty unnecessary when you're reading it. So I can't say that I love the book to begin with, but it didn't keep me from overall enjoying it for whatever it was. So this isn't one that I really recommend that highly. I read through it really quickly. It was a fun read for the most part while I was doing it, but it's not something I'm probably ever going to go back to. I did read another Louis L'Amour last year called Dark Canyon, which I did like better. So I'm not done with Louis L'Amour. I'll definitely check out his stuff again because I've heard also. I have not read his more famous stuff, but I do want to eventually get to that stuff. But anyway, that's the other thing that I read in June. So there was Phantom of the Opera and The Tall Stranger. If you've read any of these, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And as always, thank you, BookTube.